He asserts that everything has been decided, and they can't even protect their own homes, so the notion of being Castellans is questioned. He concludes by saying that once they've finished their meal, they should proceed with today's training. Meanwhile, Park Jun-ho watches the news reporting that Lee Sung-woo has emerged from the dungeon. He exclaims, "Welcome back, he's in trouble now." An event is organized, setting up a match between Lee Sung-woo and Park Soo-ho. Lennox comments that a one-on-one battle between Awakeners is a completely different challenge from hunting in a confined space, and he predicts that Lee, with his extensive experience, will triumph over Park Soo-ho. Right SPFC commentator emphasizes that Park Soo-ho has no prior experience in one-on-one combat with an Awakener on such a grand stage and suggests that he will soon discover how vastly different the SPFC is from street fights. Han Dong-soo checks the Suho channel and reads the comments from people. Excitedly, he remarks that he doubts they would have earned as much money even after raiding a level 5 dungeon 100 times. However, his mood changes when he comes across the news that Park Soo-ho has donated the entire 240 billion fight money to Japan. He expresses his frustration, questioning why Park Soo-ho would give away hard-earned money to another country. After a while they are all talking, he arrives and inquires about their activities. He mentions that his life is currently at stake, and he questions why he should give away all the money he earned by risking his life. He urges them to stop talking if they have finished eating and to go inside quickly because he intends to inspect the land in Uijeongbu. The scene then shifts, and the Awakener Bureau Director is seen having a phone conversation with the president. He acknowledges that the reported amount of fight money was reduced, and he assures that even if they distribute 5 billion to each recipient, it's more than sufficient. As a precaution, they have also signed a contract in which Park Soo-ho agrees to donate his winnings to the National Development Funds. With this arrangement in place, they can quell any speculation about internal conflicts within the country. The director also praises Park Soo-ho for his generosity and suggests that this is just the beginning, as the success of the agricultural project on Suho land will likely bring even more benefits. Meanwhile, he arrives with Wyvern, contemplating the facility that once served as the headquarters of the Third Corp, which is presently in the process of relocating. He believes that with some expansion and renovation, it should be capable of accommodating around 1,000 people. Kim Miso is already present to greet him and inquire about his perspective from above. He responds that it appears suitable and that planting within a 4-kilometer radius of this location should work well. She informs him that once he has demarcated his territory, she will submit it for approval. He utilizes tree spirit power to mark his territory. On the other side, the reporter greets all the martial arts fans and announces that they are on the Worldwide Martial Arts channel. He mentions that there are only 15 days remaining until the Battle of the Century, featuring champion Lee Sung-woo against rookie Park Soo-ho. Wright and the Psychic Channel team have prepared some footage of an interview with both the champion and the challenger. Earlier this morning, they strategically planned to meet Team Lee Sung-woo in front of the Level 7 dungeon in Osaka. He approaches Lee Sung-woo and inquires about how he's preparing for the match against Park Soo-ho. He responds that he doesn't have time to prepare for it. He explains that the number of Level 7 dungeons is about to increase significantly, and there is no time for rest as they must act for the sake of humanity's peace. After a while, he approaches Park Soo-ho's team and inquires if they are the members of Team Soo-ho, including the individuals referred to as the Four Stooges. He introduces himself as a psychic and asks them about Psychic Channel, inquiring whether he could interview with Park Soo-ho. Han Dong-soo suggests trying to find Park Soo-ho in Uijeongbu, as he is likely involved in planting trees at the moment. Meanwhile, Akiko sits in JR Hotel, attempting to gain access to Park Soo-ho's profile. After some time, she successfully gains access. The news reports that DGB Construction has started transporting building materials to Uijeongbu for construction on Suho land. There are only 2 days left until the match, but Park Soo-ho is still in seclusion within Suho land and has not yet arrived in Japan. On the other side, Akiko sits with Lee Sung-woo in the Tokyo Top City Hotel. She asks him what he's thinking. He ponders how he should deal with Park Soo-ho if he doesn't show up. She expresses doubts about it being easy. She mentions that she checked top-secret information from Korea's Awakener Bureau, revealing that according to records, Park Soo-ho returned after spending 1,000 years on another planet. He questions if he regressed multiple times over 1,000 years. She clarifies that no, she doesn't believe he's using a regression stone like him. He insists that it's impossible to live for 1,000 years without using a regression stone. She explains that, according to the records, he returned after spending 10 years on another planet. However, the passage of time on that planet is twice as fast as on Earth. If Park Suho spent 500 years regressing on Earth, then spending 1,000 years on a planet not temporally tied to Earth is not impossible. She adds that this also explains why he has never met Park Suho, as he regressed 20 years 25 times. He wonders if, in the absence of a regression stone, Park Suho drank from the fountain of eternal youth or something similar. She shares her findings, mentioning a rare item known as the Crimson Divine Peach. She explains that it's an exceptionally rare item that appears only once every 1,000 years on one of the planets and vanishes after 10 days, and it's considered a divine fruit that grants eternal youth and immortality to whoever consumes it. She expresses her concern that Park Suho might have lived even longer than him. He asserts that whoever his opponent is, he can't allow anyone who obstructs his plans to remain alive. On the other side, the commentator reports that 3 hours before the start of the match, the stadium is buzzing with excitement. But there's news that Park Suho still has not arrived in the country. He questions whether Park Suho has truly given up on the match. The commentator Masuda chimes in, emphasizing that even if it's just an event match, it shouldn't be easy for a rookie, especially considering it's his first match against the SPFC champion. They highlight that the Korean government bears all the responsibility for the pre-match inspection, implying that both Park Suho and the Korean government should take responsibility and issue an apology. Meanwhile, Lee Sung-woo inquires Akiko if there is still no news about Park Suho. She responds that according to the news from Korea, Suho Land was recently expanded to Uijeongbu. He thinks to himself that Park Suho indeed has an uncanny ability to foresee the future, as the first place where a level 7 dungeon opens in Korea is Uijeongbu. He reflects on how the combat unit that audaciously challenged the level 7 dungeon when it first appeared was obliterated, leading to a catastrophe in which Korea lost half of its total S-rank awakeners. Ultimately, they couldn't prevent the dungeon break, and due to the massive explosives used to combat the level 7 monsters, Uijeongbu was reduced to ashes. He believes that soon there will be numerous dungeon breaks across the continent, with the monsters advancing from North to South Korea, causing the complete collapse of South Korea. He understands that the Korean government is attempting to prevent this outcome by pushing Park Suho forward. On the other side, the commentator announces that there are only 7 minutes left before the match begins. According to the rules, players will be disqualified if they do not arrive at the arena an hour before the match. However, there is uncertainty about whether Park Suho can make it within the remaining 7 minutes. Just then, the sound of a wyvern is heard, and to everyone's surprise, Park Suho has arrived. The commentator exclaims that Park Suho has defied expectations by appearing in Tokyo Stadium on his wyvern, causing excitement among the audience. After a while, Park Suho lands and sends his wyvern back into a portal. He inquires about the large crowd and the whereabouts of Lee Sung-woo. The commentator informs that it appears he is searching for Lee Sung-woo in the arena, and as soon as he calls out Lee Sung-woo's name, the spectators in the stands start shouting in response. Meanwhile, Lee Sung-woo is in a room with Akiko. He says that he is heading out. She attempts to stop him, but he reassures her not to worry, stating that he will win and return safely. Lee Sung-woo arrives in the arena and asks Park Suho if he'll allow him to ask a few questions before he kills him. He inquires if he is a survivor of the apocalypse. He responds by asking what the apocalypse is. He continues, questioning if there was another regression stone and how many years he can regress with the one he possesses. He further inquiries about the nature of a regression stone. The commentator sends a transmission drone near them to capture their conversation. He taunts him, suggesting that he must find it enjoyable now that he has returned to the past, feeling like he has the world at his feet. He asks if he has come back to the past. Lee Sung-woo attempts to attack him, but Park Suho retaliates by hitting him in the face and throwing him aside. This sudden turn of events leaves everyone in the stadium and those watching the live broadcast in a state of shock. The commentator remarks that Lee Sung-woo appears to have sustained significant damage and is not displaying any immediate response. He continues to approach slowly, and Lee Sung-woo is now in a precarious situation. He approaches him closely and instructs him to get up. He questions how someone with the title of champion can be so weak. He manages to rise to his feet, noticing that his nose is bleeding, and wonders if he was struck by magic. He comments on the necessity of humility and says an ant has a queen and a frog in a well. With frustration, he attempts to attack once more, but Park Suho effortlessly punches him, employing tornado power to launch him into the air and following up with a fire fairy shower. The commentator, witnessing this one-sided beating, expresses disbelief at the unexpected turn of events. The shock is palpable among the spectators. Park Soo-ho firmly grasps Lee Sung-woo by the neck, insisting that he not feign death because he knows Lee Sung-woo is still conscious. The status window displays Lee Sung-woo's HP at 25%. Park Soo-ho decides to inquire as well, asking why Lee Sung-woo sought him out. Lee Sung-woo responds that he wants to kill Park Soo-ho. Park Soo-ho then questions why Lee Sung-woo believes he deserves to die. Lee Sung-woo asserts that it's because of Park Soo-ho that his meticulously crafted plan, developed over 500 years of hard work and dedication, has been ruined. Park Soo-ho inquires about the plan Lee Sung-woo had been working on for 500 years. Lee Sung-woo consumes a potion, transforming into the monstrous entity known as the Fury of God. Meanwhile, Kurosawa watches everything happening in the stadium on the screen and mentions the potion to recover his stamina. He says after taking the potion, it appears that he has learned some interesting things from Planet Gutchum. When Lee Sung-woo transforms the Fury of God, everything is destroyed in the stadium. People are badly injured, and even Akiko is injured. He uses a skill so lethal and powerful that the human body can't handle it, so he has to call on the physique of a monster. Astonishingly, he used this skill, which he had been saving for the level 8 boss, Toad Monarch, on a human like that. Park Soo-ho also sustains some head injuries but gets up again and expresses surprise. He believes he was able to survive that ultimate move and asks what item Lee Sung-woo is using to be so strong and what he used to regress. Lee Sung-woo replies that he doesn't understand what he means by regressing and this isn't an item. It's a skill called Forest's Blessing. He explains that a mere skill can replace an elixir. He asserts that it's an elixir-grade skill and that it completely recovers lost stamina and mana within 5 seconds. Meanwhile, he launches a fierce attack on his opponent, hurling him aside, and remarks that it seems like the planet may face destruction because of him. His opponent retorts that his 500-year plan has been thwarted by him, signifying that the planet's demise is now attributable to him. Consequently, the blame for the planet's destruction falls on him, and he should meet his end at his hands. He inquires if his adversary comprehends how he reached this juncture. With a swift kick and a forceful throw, he asserts that his adversary is simply deranged. He believes that it's remarkable that there's a human he cannot defeat, even after undergoing a monstrous transformation. Nevertheless, he perceives no prospect of reversal, and it doesn't concern him. He continues to pummel his opponent mercilessly, all the while stating that the ruin of his plan wasn't caused by him. He resolves to enlighten him about reality from this point forward. He privately thinks that his adversary should continue talking, divulging all of his knowledge, as in the subsequent setback, he will absorb all of his power, even assimilating his soul. He proclaims that the world's savior must be him. Then Park Soo-ho transforms, becoming a black wolf, and delivers a powerful punch that reverts his adversary into a human, causing his stone replica to shatter. He transforms once more, this time into an eagle, and approaches him. He inquires about his thoughts, asking if he can now perceive the real world. He asserts that the reason he couldn't save Earth over such an extended period is simply due to his weakness. He issues a warning, advising him not to ever trespass into his territory again, as if he does, he will genuinely end his life. He points out that 95% of humankind will perish in the impending apocalypse, and he will meet the same fate soon. His adversary retorts, questioning why his past must determine his future. He privately reflects that there is no future for someone like him who dwells in the past. Choi Soo-young is watching a match, and the commentator mentions that even though Lee Sung-woo has collapsed, Park Soo-ho has transformed into an eagle and flown toward him. She recalls the incident at the hospital where he told her they couldn't be together because she was still too weak. She contemplates that if their strengths aren't balanced, one side will inevitably break. On the other side, Park Soo-ho secured victory and donated all the money to Japan. The families of the injured individuals collectively filed lawsuits against Lee Sung-woo, who remained unconscious for a week. During this time, he experiences a dream in which Park Soo-ho warns him. He abruptly wakes up and questions how much time has passed. He reaches for his phone and starts watching the news, but Akiko arrives and snatches his phone away, cautioning him not to look because people are only shocked by his defeat. She asks if he's alright, and he replies that he wants to be alone for a while. She agrees but informs him she'll be taking the phone, and what he needs right now is complete stability. He rises from his bed and gazes out of the window, where people are protesting outside the hospital. He muses that these were the people who always used to follow him around, and no matter how much he dedicated to them, they remained the same. Then, he looks at his stone of replica and laments that if he had held on a bit longer, he could have copied everything. He reaches for his regression stone and explains that with it, he can return to Earth from 20 years ago. Given the current circumstances, he concludes that there's nothing else he can do but go back 20 years and eliminate Park Soo-ho. He mentions that he can activate the regression stone in about 2 years but is considering upgrading it to level 3. Meanwhile, Novice and his friends enter his room. They inquire if he has woken up and if he is all right now. He asks them what's wrong, and they respond that it's an order from the bureau to bring him along. He expresses surprise, stating that he didn't receive any notice. He questions Toshihiro and Yuichi about why they are here, and they explain that they were also summoned and happened to meet on the way. He reflects on how all the S-rank awakeners in Tokyo have gathered at the summons of the bureau. He instructs them to wait outside while he gets ready. They agree but insist he should come along quietly, mentioning Shimizu and Rokuto waiting outside the door. He scoffs, wondering if they believe that just the 5 of them can defeat him. Nobisuke urges him, saying that it's just a simple investigation and he only needs to go there for a while. He contemplates that on the day of the match, the defense agency should have recorded his entire conversation with Park Soo-ho, and they are probably curious about the items in his inventory. He asks if they are also coveting the regression stone and planning to lock him up and torture him. Nobisu clarifies that it's not like that. It's because of the missing items from the reports. Toshihiro suggests that if there's something like that, then it's right to use it for the good of the citizens. This infuriates him, and he declares that they have crossed the line, and Japan will soon realize the consequences of their mistake today. After a while, they launch an attack on him, and he activates the Fury of God, countering their assaults. He challenges them, asking if he appears weak just because he lost once. He threatens that if a single one of them makes a move, Toshihiro's neck will snap. They plead with him to stop, but he insists on knowing who gave the order. He learns that it's the commissioner's order, Commissioner Takeo of the Supernatural Bureau. He reflects on Takeo, a patriotic man who primarily values bloodlines. For someone so opposed to Korea, Takeo was likely uncomfortable cooperating with him all along and had been waiting for him to fail, seizing the opportunity as soon as this incident occurred. He says that Commissioner Takeo questions his loyalty to Great Japan. Takeo points out that when Lee Sung-woo's team raided level 7 dungeons, 9 people died. He questions whether he ever transformed into a monster or used an elixir to heal his team. Furthermore, the items and skills he displayed this time have never been documented anywhere. This implies that all reports on the skills and items submitted by Combat Team 1 of the Defense Agency are false. He wonders if he hid some items that should be used for the country's defense for personal gain. He suggests that, before opening a special investigation committee, they should ask him some questions, not because they don't trust him, but to dispel all doubts. He alleges that Takeo simply wants to take all the items he possesses for himself, and he likely promised to grant him the position of captain of Japan's Combat Team 1 if things went well. He contends that Takeo claims his loyalty to the defense agency has never been in question since he was a part of the Navy, and that the agency needs individuals like him. Then he responds that he has already witnessed the destruction of Japan 25 times and wanted to rebuild human civilization here due to the geographical advantages. However, he supposes that the plan is now in ruins because there's no way to curb this country's greed. He inquires further, asking if Akiko is aware of it. He informs him she knows about this. He kills Toshihiro in anger. The news reports that Lee Sung-woo kills 2 awakeners and injures 3 others before making his escape. Meanwhile, in Japan's Supernatural Bureau, Commissioner Takeo expresses his distrust in helping others, citing the incident involving Lee Sung-woo. He believes that they took in a man abandoned by Korea and turned him into a hero, only for him to turn against them at the slightest provocation. Takeo suspects that Lee Sung-woo might have been a spy planted by Korea from the very beginning. He sees this incident as an opportunity to eliminate any threats within their country and replace them with pure-blooded heroes. He instructs Kitano to contact all broadcasting stations and the press to schedule a briefing about Lee Sung-woo in the conference room within 2 hours. The news reports that Park Soo-ho has established himself as the world's strongest individual in his new location in Uijeon, and the Soo-ho Guild has experienced a surge in its membership. The countdown to Uijeongbu becoming Seoul's 13th district has also begun. Meanwhile, Han Dong-soo watches a news report about champion Lee Sung-woo escaping after committing murder, then disappearing and killing 2 S-rank awakeners. The news further reveals that Mr. Takeo from Japan's Awakener Federation has called for an emergency press conference at the government office. Mr. Takeo voices their suspicion that Lee Sung-woo may be a spy sent by Korea, and demands an explanation from the Korean government regarding the recent terrorist attack associated with Lee Sung-woo. In response to these accusations, a spokesperson from the Blue House, Kim Byung-seok, holds a briefing at the archives, firmly rejecting Commissioner Taekyo's unfounded allegations and expressing great resentment towards Japan's unreasonable provocation. After observing all of these news reports, Han Dong-soo expresses doubt that someone who was severely beaten by Suho would come to their location. He decides to search for Suho in case Lee Sung-woo arrives when Suho is absent, as he did last time. After a while, Han Dong-soo notices something familiar in the sky, and a new member of the Suho Guild screams and starts running from the side. Han Dong-soo realizes that he may have arrived and begins running as well. Jang Yi-shik arrives and asks where they are going. Han Dong-soo explains that he believes Lee Sung-woo has arrived. He says that he received a report from the detection team about a nearby portal, so he was on his way to investigate. They see a new portal opening, and it appears to be quite strong. They check the status window, which indicates that it's a level 7 dungeon with dimension energy measuring 7530, and the potential break in 42 days. Shocked by this revelation, they realize the gravity of the situation. Park Jun-ho considers the fact that even with Park Soo-ho, their focus on becoming the 13th district led them to admit people without thoroughly assessing their capabilities. In the event of a dungeon break, this place could be destroyed, and the safety of everyone cannot be guaranteed. They are left uncertain about what to do next. Yeomjin suggests that they should relocate before the dungeon potentially breaks. Park Jun-ho expresses doubts, believing that Suho may not allow them to leave, and if he is present, he might insist on keeping them here. Jang Yi-shik questions Suho's whereabouts during such a critical moment. In response, they decide to split up and search for him in different directions. Before they proceed, a weasel suddenly appears in the center of their group and questions their reasons for coming here. Park Jun-ho admits that their eagerness to become the 13th district branch manager blinded them. The weasel explains that they were chosen by the government because this area is a larger hunting ground, and he appreciates their honesty. He encourages them to embrace the wilderness and mentions that a significant prey has presented itself. He asks if they are willing to hunt with gratitude. Han Dong-soo expresses gratitude but points out that their current levels are at E rank. The weasel, in response, tells them that the prey is practically offering itself to be caught, and if they continue running away, they'll return to their past. He questions if they desire to go back in time, which they vehemently deny, emphasizing how hard they worked to reach this point. They decide to scout ahead. Suddenly, the weasel transforms into Park Soo-ho himself. Park Soo-ho notes the significant improvement in the newbie's abilities and emphasizes the importance of managing the construction efforts. He designates Myungjin and Ishil for the first raid, instructing them to follow him. Han Dong-soo expresses regret that his name wasn't included in the very first raid of a level 7 dungeon in Korea, lamenting the missed opportunity. He decides he will join the raid as well. They enter the level 7 dungeon, and it's an undead land. They are being attacked. Meanwhile, the news is being broadcast that after the event in Japan, a level 7 dungeon has finally appeared in Korea. It is the 8th level 7 dungeon in the world and the 2nd in Asia. Major foreign media outlets are saying that it was something expected to happen, and it has been reported that the international airport is currently in chaos due to people trying to escape. The reporter states that it is a mess, and as the Awakena Bureau is in the middle of a meeting discussing how to proceed, he will end this news flash by reporting that a team of 3 from Suho Land, including Park Soo-ho, has already entered the dungeon. Meanwhile, at the Awakena Bureau, the director acknowledges the impressive performance of the broadcasting stations these days, likening it to having placed a listening device in their building. He inquires whether they reported entering the dungeon as soon as it appeared. He mentions that Park Soo-ho, Han Dong-soo, and Jang Yi-shil are currently inside. A gray-haired individual inquires why he brought those two with him. The bespectacled one explains that Han Dong-soo possesses the video memory skill. The director suggests that they should at least create a video recording for the following teams. The bespectacled one responds by noting that there are already numerous videos of people clearing level 7 dungeons from foreign countries on the internet. The director then asks about the preparations of the combat teams. One gray-haired individual reports that all 13 teams within the Bureau are currently awaiting orders. However, even when considering the best within the Bureau, they still have only a few A-rank Awakenas, with the majority being B-rank. Another person adds that, furthermore, time is too limited, and they must clear the dungeon 88 times within 42 days to prevent it from collapsing. The bespectacled one checks something on a tablet and mentions that Lee Sung-woo's team set a record of 8 days, given that the time inside the dungeon is usually twice that of Earth's. This essentially means that clearing it takes an average of 20 days. The director observes that this implies they need to clear it twice a day. A gray-haired person, referring to the data, suggests that they need to evacuate the country. The bespectacled one asks if they shouldn't send a request for cooperation to the guilds and attempt to somehow halt it. He proposes the idea of evacuating people from Uijeongbu Suho land and stationing personnel at the Seoul defense wall in preparation for the dungeon's collapse. The director remarks that everyone will perish if a second level 7 dungeon appears within Seoul. He inquires about Suho Guild's wall of trees, wondering if it's quite strong. He points out that even if they can confine the monsters behind the defense wall, there's nothing the guilds in the country can do if a second or third level 7 dungeon emerges. The director believes that as long as the level 7 dungeon in Suho land is taken care of, it will be the safest place on the planet. He asks if Section Chief Kim Miso is at Suho land and suggests they call her to assess the situation on site. After a while, they observe Suho land with a drone to find Kim Miso and comment it's quieter than expected, and it also appears that the construction is still ongoing. They observe that the infrastructure construction is being carried out by DGB Construction. They notice a child riding a wolf, and the workers are eating peacefully. They wonder if they are playing war games and question if this is Korea, as it appears like another world. The director asks if the drone's location is truly Uijeongbu Suho land. He inquires about the whereabouts of Section Chief Kim Miso and locates her through the drone. He remarks that it looks like the soldiers' dormitory building and is surprised to see her sunbathing. She gets up and asks who he is, prompting the director to inquire if she is Choi Suwon. She explains that it's lunchtime and she is just taking a break, apologizing for any inconvenience. He then asks her to provide a brief update on the situation on site. She explains that there was some unrest when the level 7 dungeon first appeared due to the evacuation manual. But after Park Suho's team went to raid it, things calmed down. She mentions that 3 hours after the dungeon's appearance, the infrastructure construction is proceeding as planned, with Park Junho, the vice guild master of Suho Guild, overseeing everything, and Monk Myungjin, a guild member, training recruits. He asks if there is anything else she is curious about. The director notes that the entire country of Korea is in a panic, but that place feels like a different world. General Manager Choi enters the room and informs them that the Ministry of Defense has deployed Sun Jinwoo's 707A Special Forces unit to Uijeongbu. The director approves of this decision, emphasizing that even if a dungeon break occurs, they must do their best to prevent it and expresses hope in Park Suho. He instructs them to retrieve his combat gear, as he will now be the on-site commander for the level 7 dungeon. The scene shifts as Akiko is tied to a chair when Commissioner Tokyo arrives and asks if she's awake. She responds by saying he's making a mistake. He retorts by asking if she needs to be electrocuted some more and shows her bracelet, questioning how they found it, especially since it's not something she wears often, and she hid it quite well. She inquires about how he obtained the bracelet. He informs her that there's no need to ponder, as they have already examined everything within it. She then asks what they want now. He reveals that there was a particularly intriguing notebook within it. She dismisses it as just a diary, to which he counters that even Lee Sungwoo probably doesn't know about its existence. He adds that she specializes in information gathering, and Lee Sungwoo likely trusted her because he didn't anticipate her taking such actions. She urges him to get to the point. Commissioner Tokyo explains that the diary contains information about the future, detailing who will become heroes or villains, what kinds of incidents will occur, when and where they will happen, and even how the world will eventually come to an end. He elaborates that armed with knowledge of the future, he gathered individuals with great potential and made it appear as though he trained them. All of this was done to reap the benefits, and he brought those who would have shaped Japan's future, even if left on their own, into his team, making them look up to him. Consequently, he rose to become the champion and the country's hero, with the citizens revering him as such. He credits this achievement to the regression stone he possesses. Akiko finally asks if that's what he wants to know in the end. He responds by urging her to reveal where he is hiding, promising to grant her what she desires. She says she does not know. A person watching them from a glass wall informs Takeo that she's telling the truth. Takeo says it would have been great if she'd known. She says it would have been great if they hadn't made Lee Sungwoo their enemy. He says she will be locked up in the Awakena exclusive prison, and she will meet a sad end while trapped there. She says she doesn't think he has the time to worry about others right now, and Lee Sungwoo will probably want to meet him. After a while, an operator shows Takeo a video of Lee Sungwoo and says this is the last video because he has gone underground. He states that they are currently trying to track him down with drones. He explains that Lee Sung-woo is a villain who is attempting to overthrow them by luring Korean awakeners and citizens to his country. He emphasizes using all possible means to locate him and make him accountable for his crimes. He believes that Lee Sung-woo certainly has a regression stone in his inventory. Meanwhile, on a beach, Lee Sung-woo is seated, watching the news on his phone. The news broadcast has just revealed the list of guild members who have joined Park Soo-ho in his raid of the level 7 dungeon. He remarks that it's a 3-man raid, with Jang Ishik being D rank and Han Dong-soo being E rank. He says, let's see how much he can change the world with his strength. He writes something in a notebook and mentions that to prepare for his next regression, he needs to gather as much information as possible about that guy. The news reports that they have received more information, and Korea's best combat team, Special Forces Unit 707A, is on its way to Uijeongbu. He comments that Korea's destruction began in full swing after the combat team led by Korea's number 1 was annihilated. He notes that a level 7 dungeon has appeared, but Busan remains peaceful. He thinks that when the end of the world arrives, those bright faces will be stained with blood and tears, and if he manages to survive, he will help them smile again. Meanwhile, members of SF Unit 707A have arrived at the Suho Guild. The director has also arrived at the Suho Guild. Park Jun-ho and Kim Mi-so see the director, and she asks why he is here. He responds, what does he think and how could he just sit calmly in the office when the country is in the middle of a crisis? He meets Park Jun-ho and explains that to ease their citizens' anxiety, the Awaken Bureau and the Ministry of Defense have decided to fully support the Suho Guild in any way they can. Park Jun-ho expresses Park Soo-ho's dislike for outsiders entering the territory like this. The director acknowledges this but emphasizes that the appearance of a level 7 dungeon is not the Suho Guild's problem. He states that it is a national crisis, and it is not just the Suho Guild's duty to clear it. She says she will do her best to explain things to Park Soo-ho when he comes out, and they are willing to pay an appropriate amount for using the dungeon. After a while, Kim Mi-so stands alone with the director. She inquires about the reason for his presence. He responds by asking what she means by that question. He asserts that the director of the bureau should not remain inactive during a national crisis like this. She questions whether he evacuated to this location because it appeared to be the safest. He challenges her perception of him and instructs her to cease the nonsensical talk and set up his place at the command post. He explains that they will be temporarily transferring all available aces to join them, including Choi Soo-young from the detection team. He emphasizes that Choi Soo-young should be in the barracks at this moment. He then inquires about the claim that the defensive wall of trees in this area cannot be breached, not even by a missile. She responds that she is uncertain and suggests that he try it himself. After a while, Sun Jin-woo informs Park Jun-ho that they should not create any difficulties for him. He proposes that if he is willing to permit it, they will establish their post in that location. He believes that the man of Iron Fist, who turned down a blank check from the Shilla Guild out of patriotism rather than a desire to avoid trouble, appears to be doing this because he does not wish to accept any assistance. He adds, let him do as he wishes. He also requests that they ensure the paths of the soldiers and civilians do not intersect, as the soldiers might be somewhat sensitive due to the impending raid. After a while, a healthy soldier has his food and remarks that he believes this place is where trash accumulates, except for Park Soho. But the food is exceptionally good. His friend points to the granny cutting food and mentions that she is cooking in a hurry because the food prepared for 200 people doesn't appear to be sufficient. Just then, he is struck by a newcomer from the Suho Guild and becomes angry. He seizes the newbie's collar and shouts at him. Meanwhile, Gunwoo pilfers the bread and attempts to escape while striking his face. Granny Sukja becomes angry and hurls the knife, saying that she had warned him not to touch the bread since they don't have enough. However, he leaps out of the window and offers the bread to their monkey friends. Healthy soldier spots him from the window and inquires about his identity. His friend replies that he is Park Soo-ho's nephew. He mentions that his movements resemble those of an awakened monkey. He remarks on how coldly Granny throws those knives and expresses his anger, saying that the knives were headed straight for him. His friend explains that it's because he was causing a scene. He asks if he wants to face the consequences for touching Park Soo-ho's family, like Lee Sung-woo. He then questions if Granny is a member of Park Soo-ho's family and wonders what kind of family is filled with lunatics. After a while, Soo Jin-woo sits in an office with the director. The director asks what has brought him here. Soo Jin-woo replies that they plan to start the raid today. The director suggests that they have just arrived here not long ago, and wonders if it's better to let the soldiers rest for at least a day. He responds that they have already rested enough. He explains that they have sent an official cooperation request to each guild and are currently in the process of adjusting the plans for the additional combat teams. He hopes the director can wait for at least a day. He asks if he doesn't trust them or if they don't need more people even now. He clarifies that it's not about trust. Even Lee Sung-woo's world record team had casualties, and for their country, which lacks manpower compared to Japan, even a single casualty would be a huge loss. He emphasizes that if they enter hastily and lose men, they won't be able to carry out subsequent raids effectively. He mentions that 4 S-rank and 12 A-rank mercenaries are currently on their way from Busan, and they need to include them in the combat unit. He reminds him not to forget that Unit 707 is their best asset. He responds with an understood and agrees to keep the unit on standby for one more day. Meanwhile, in the camps, Choi Soo-young is sleeping, and Kim Miso approaches, playfully tossing a fire fairy on her. Kim Miso remarks that Choi Soo-young is supposed to come and greet them since she has finally returned after such a long absence, questioning why she's just resting. She responds that being away was better. She begins teasing her about Park Soo-ho's name. She asks what that guy has to do with her. She mentions she called Park Soo-ho many times while she was dispatched. She gets angry and asks why she is going around checking other people's call records. She reflects on how she didn't even think about how the bureau was turned upside down when she suddenly disappeared. Just then, a red-haired girl enters the room, and both Choi Soo-young and Kim Miso are delighted to see her. Choi Soo-young asks if she brought the chicken. The three of them sit down to enjoy the food Hong Se-hee brought. Hong Se-hee inquires if they've seen the video of Song-hee getting rejected by him in 5 minutes. Kim Miso asks if Song-hee and Park Soo-ho are dating, to which she explains that it was all revealed in the Song-hee edition of Unanswered Questions. She was rejected the moment they met, and now she's getting tutored because she wants to take the Awakened Mercenary exam. She asks if they know why she got rejected, and she replies that it's because she was weak. Kim Miso deduces that Park Soo-ho's type is someone strong. Hong Se-hee then turns to Kim Miso and inquires that she is Park Soo-ho's liaison officer at the bureau. She emphasizes that she is ranked #1 among women in Korea, and foremost among the country's strongest women. She playfully asks if she could introduce her to Park Soo-ho. The news broadcasts that 24 hours have passed since Park Soo-ho entered the level 7 dungeon. 38 mercenaries, including S-rank members, have joined the Vanguard and the full party of 30 from Special Forces Unit 707A, who are about to raid the level 7 dungeon. After a while, Sun Jin-woo's teams are ready to enter the level 7 dungeon. Park Jun-ho asks a newbie where is Monk Myung-jin. He says that Monk Myung-jin entered a level 1 dungeon with them yesterday and defeated the boss several times by himself. However, he suddenly went off by himself with a strangely vicious expression on his face. Jun-ho asks, did he bring his medicine? On the other side, Sun Jin-woo addresses his team and states that the only intel they have on this level 7 dungeon is that it is an undead land, which means they are acting as the vanguard. He says that first, they are going to find the best place to set up camp, then they will make a map, analyze the situation, and devise a plan of operation. He reminds them not to forget that they are the best combat team in their country, and expresses his hope that they all do their best to fulfill their duties. They begin entering the portal, and 28 successfully enter, while 2 S-rankers fail to enter, and the portal closes. Just then, the door bursts open, and a countdown starts, leaving everyone in shock. The director states that it's Park Soo-ho, and reporters also confirm that he has returned. News is being broadcast, reporting that a level 7 dungeon has been cleared by him in just 24 hours. The director then asks him to please allow them to express their sincerest gratitude and looks at Jang Yi-shik and Han Dong-soo, who are sleeping on the grass. He inquires if his teammates are still alive. He responds that they weren't able to sleep for 3 days, so they are just resting. He acknowledges that he must be tired but requests that he trouble him to write down his dungeon clearing strategy while he rests. Kim Miso suggests that even if it's just a map or details about the monsters, it would be of great help to the teams currently preparing for the next raid. He replies, asking if they are not going to send another hastily assembled combat team to his hunting grounds. He explains that they are currently in a state of national emergency to prevent a dungeon break, and it's best to have one more team join. He firmly declines, stating that there's no need to join forces because he's more than capable by himself. She believes that a level 7 dungeon isn't a national catastrophe for him. It's more like an island full of treasures that have landed right in his lap. He doesn't see their intention to send in a team as an attempt to help prevent a disaster. Instead, he views it as their attempt to claim a share of his treasure. He asks why there are so many people gathered here right now. She acknowledges his perspective and assures him that they won't send in any more teams. However, she mentions that one of the Special Forces units from the Ministry of Defense is currently in the middle of a raid. He asks for permission for them to enter his hunting grounds. She points out Park Jun-ho, and he agrees to grant permission. Park Soo-ho pulls Park Jun-ho aside, scolds him, and asks about the whereabouts of Monk Myung-jin. Meanwhile, Monk is on the verge of attacking a reporter when he spots him and orders that he be brought over. The director questions what those guys are doing. While some guards apprehend him and escort him to the portal door, they all enter the portal once again. Reporters speculate that they are going in right now without resting, assuming that if he is truly determined to prevent a dungeon break by himself, the Suho Guild might become the first level 7 guild. However, it's too early to determine, as one would need to clear the dungeon twice a day to prevent a break. They mention that, at the very least, they'll have to wait and see if they can reduce the clear time to 7 hours. The guards toss Monk Myung-jin into the portal, while reporters observe that Monk doesn't appear to be in good health. After a while, the director announces that he's going to take a short break and gather information from them once they awaken. He reminds them that he is still the on-scene commander and needs something to appease the higher-ups. They both bring in the first aid van where the doctor checks if the machines are working properly. He confirms that both machines are currently at B rank. The other person points out that they were at E rank and D rank when they entered. He examines their status screens and expresses amazement at the significant level up they achieved from going through a level 7 dungeon just once, emphasizing that there is concrete proof of such progress right here. Suddenly, both of them wake up, ready for a fight. After a few seconds, Han Dong-soo realizes they are no longer in immediate danger. He inquires about Park Soo-ho's whereabouts. The doctor responds that he heard Park Soo-ho re-entered the dungeon about 20 minutes ago, along with 2 other members of the Suho Guild. Jang Ishik suggests that they likely have only about 30 minutes left and asks for guidance on what they should do during that time. The director advises them to spend all the money they have on purchasing items if they wish to avoid dying without even leaving a corpse. They proceed to check their status screens. The scene shifts and Lee Sun-woo watches the news reporting that Park Soo-ho has re-entered the dungeon without resting. He observes people cheering for his dungeon raid, and news announces the completion of a residential area for 3,000 households in Namangju Suho land. He expresses shock, wondering how Park Soo-ho managed to clear it in just a day. He also notices news coverage of Park Soo-ho, Monk Myung-jin, and Park Jun-ho returning after reducing the dungeon clear time by 3 hours, achieving their second clear in 21 hours. On the other side, a medical team arrives to provide healing. Han Dong-soo, with no injuries, has his stamina at 30%, while Monk Myung-jin requires 1 hour and 20 minutes of healing. Han Dong-soo questions their actions, to which she responds that it's the Bureau's healing service, and they are doing it to assist. She requests that they allow them to take care of Monk Myung-jin. He wonders why they would engage in something that seems like a waste of time since they will recover from sleep once they return to the dungeon. She explains that it's 3 times faster in the dungeon, so as long as safety is ensured, it's better. Upon his orders, they both also come here to pick them up and enter the portal. They inquire about who will take care of the guild, and she responds that she will monitor the construction's progress. He expresses gratitude and asks why she's doing this. She explains that it's their job to make it easier for him to focus all his manpower on raiding the dungeon. He agrees to leave it to her and suggests that if she has questions, she can talk to Aunt Sukja. He then orders them to proceed and enter the portal, instructing them to wake up the others. Park Jun-ho wakes up and asks if it hasn't been cleared yet. Han Dong-soo says it was cleared once, and then they all came back in. Park Jun-ho insists on having some humanity and allowing the rest of them to recognize their differences. Park Soo-ho remarks that they have been sleeping here for 30 minutes, adding that it isn't such a short amount of time. He explains that Jun-ho is at a C rank, Yishik is at a B rank, Myung-jin is at a B rank, and Dong-soo is also at a B rank. Given their respective levels, sleeping in the dungeon for 30 minutes, without factoring in the time difference, should be more than sufficient for their recovery. They all proceed to check their levels on the status screen. He says that their bodies are rapidly growing stronger, but their minds have yet to catch up, which is why they feel fatigued despite having had ample time to recover. He further emphasizes that with such an attitude, they won't be able to protect their home, even if they reach S rank. Consequently, they are all undergoing special training until their lifeless expressions regain some vitality. Park Soo-ho says, "Don't the guys realize they have to get stronger quickly so they can leave the house to them while he is away?" Just then, undead skeleton knights arrive to attack them, but they are all fought back strongly and most of them are knocked down. Some undead orcs approach them. Park Suho says this wave of opponents is approaching them by itself. Is it because of Myungjin? They all use their different powers to kill the dead orcs, but suddenly, an orc kicks Park Junho. Jang Yishik says he has suddenly lost strength, and his sword's edge is becoming dull. Han Dongsu says his accuracy is also suffering. On the other side, an orc is badly beating Myungjin. Just then, a banshee comes to attack them. Meanwhile, an operator shows a video to Kim Miso and the director, where Jang Yishik is fighting against the banshee. He describes the banshee as an undead-type monster that appears to be on par with a mid-boss. It is estimated to be an S rank, and its specialty lies in a debuff that reduces its opponent's physical damage, accuracy, and speed. It can also transform its arm into an arrow and perform ranged attacks. The director asks if he is suggesting that the banshee is not the boss and questions why they don't have the rest of the video. He explains that they attempted to forcibly extract the video while Han Dongsu was sleeping in the infirmary, but he woke up in the middle of it. He mentions that they will formally request the video from Han Dongsu once he comes out. The director adds that, aside from Lee Sung-woo's team, no one has ever succeeded in clearing a level 7 dungeon. Kim Miso points out that there's also Park Suho in their team, and no other team has returned from raiding a level 7 dungeon yet. He says Japan is refusing to share information for some reason, and they are receiving several requests for information about the level 7 dungeon. He states that their immediate priority is the safety of SF Unit 707A and asks how things are over there. He shows a screen and says this is a scene of Jang Yishik, who was barely C rank at the time, receiving healing from Park Suho's fairies after he almost died upon entering the dungeon. He mentions that they have observed that he received not only healing but also a buff. He explains that without Park Suho's extremely long-range healing, they believe that no team on the planet could defeat the Banshee without suffering casualties. The director asks how long it has been since the SF unit went in. He says that 9 Earth days have elapsed, and if they compare them to Lee Sung-woo's team in Sapporo's level 7 dungeon, they could say that there's still some time to spare. However, the unit's composition is weaker than Lee Sung-woo's team's, so it is likely that the unit would quickly collapse if they encountered a Banshee early on and sustained casualties. He says they have to save them. She asks what they can do from the outside. He receives a call, and the person informs him that Park Suho's team is coming out and the third time clear time has been reduced to 13 hours. They are all shocked to hear this. The director announces that he will arrive soon and instructs him to hold on to Park Suho. He adds that they had initially emerged from the dungeon, but Park Suho has since re-entered. She explains that if they analyze Park Suho's previous dungeon clear times up to level 6 and make comparisons, they would find that he completed solo dungeon raids in half the time it took when he was part of a team. She further elaborates that based on this data, Park Suho's 4th level 7 dungeon raid should take approximately 6 hours. He remarks that had he known Park Suho's skills were this exceptional, he would have made every effort to prevent the deployment of the SF unit. She then inquires about what he meant by a way to save the SF unit. He clarifies that the more he repeats something, the faster he becomes at it, and suggests that if Park Suho were to assemble a team with rank veterans, they could achieve remarkable results. After a while, Park Suho emerges from the level 7 dungeon, and the director approaches him, sitting on his feet, and earnestly pleads for help. He inquires did someone mention they're going to kill him. Kim Miso then expresses her desire to discuss something with him if he can spare some time. After a while, they sit by a lake, and Park Suho asks how he is supposed to assist the SF unit. He states that he is currently clearing the dungeon faster and questions why he should help those thieves. Kim Miso explains that 3 days have elapsed since Captain Sun Jinwoo's team entered the dungeon, which translates to 9 days passing within the dungeon itself. The director interjects, stating that it is said that spending more than 15 days in the dungeon reduces the survival rate to below 50%. And they cannot afford to lose their special forces unit so needlessly. He angrily demands to know who authorized such a reckless entry. He admits to making a miscalculation due to his impatience. He asks how he can save the people who have already entered the dungeon. She responds that there is a way to go and save them. She recounts an incident that occurred 5 years ago in a level 1 dungeon near the Namhan River in Yongpyo. She explains that since the level 1 dungeon appeared in a field, the entrance fee has remained affordable. Additionally, there is a high chance of finding an artifact there, making it a popular dungeon often referred to as the lottery and treasure dungeon. As more and more people have come to try their luck, the number of available doors quickly decreased. The problem arose with the last door that was raided when 5 C-ranked mercenaries entered a level 1 dungeon with a capacity limit of 15. However, upon entering, they discovered the corpses of those who had entered earlier, killed by spiders. He questions why there were already corpses everywhere if they hadn't even started hunting, and the door had just opened. She continues, explaining that the door's countdown began suddenly, and by the end of their desperate attempt to exit, only one mercenary had managed to escape alive. This particular mercenary happened to be a track and field athlete, enabling him to make it through the door within the countdown. The director mentions that an investigation was initiated, and the inquiry concluded that 2 teams had entered the dungeon shortly after each other due to a computing error. He goes on to state that this event revealed that the final dungeon could admit more people. However, he emphasizes that they cannot exceed the capacity limit as long as there are surviving soldiers in the last dungeon before the dungeon break. She summarizes that additional individuals can enter the same dungeon under the condition that they do not surpass the capacity limit. He asks that they request him to clear the remaining dungeons as swiftly as possible and subsequently rescue the SF unit soldiers trapped in the last dungeon. The director asserts that he is the sole individual in this world capable of saving those people. He questions whether they had not reached maximum capacity upon entering. She responded that there were 2 available positions. He inquires if he clears it 4-5 times a day, and whether he should be able to reach them before the break occurs. He expresses concern that as time passes, the survival rate decreases, and if it takes a month in dungeon time, the survival rate will plummet to a mere 2%. Therefore, he needs to clear it as expeditiously as possible to ensure at least one more person can return alive. He wonders aloud why he had to engage in such a futile task. He says that he will arrange for the government to compensate him for all the experience and profits missed out on during the rescue period. However, she responds with a firm no need and proceeds from there. After a while, a reporter announces that he is currently situated in front of the level 7 dungeon in Uijeongbu Suho Land. Park Suho, who has managed to reduce the level 7 dungeon clear time to a mere 4 hours, has now initiated his rescue mission for the Special Forces Combined Unit. He entered the dungeon only 10 minutes ago and is anticipated to complete it in approximately 2 hours. Suddenly, they are all taken aback when they witness Park Suho returning from the dungeon unexpectedly. He reports a shocking event has just occurred and they are witnessing Park Suho exiting the level 7 dungeon after clearing it for the 6th time in a mere 13 minutes, and now he is re-entering. The scene shifts and the news broadcast informs that amid the world's fascination with Park Suho's incredible dungeon clearing ability, 4 days have elapsed since Sun Jinwoo's SF unit entered the dungeon. Park Suho has now embarked on his 8th raid of the dungeon. Despite Park Suho's remarkable average clear time of 20 minutes, the news reporting that the combined unit's survival rate has dropped below 50% has prompted numerous individuals to gather in the square. Meanwhile, inside the level 7 dungeon, the SF unit is making its way toward their base camp. Choi Suung suddenly halts them all and informs them that a wraith is located 140 meters ahead. Banshees attack Choi Suung and her team, and they attempt to conceal themselves, but she manages to locate them once more. A soldier engages her and eliminates her. The girl with red hair insists that they need to relocate, but she asserts that it's too late. A soldier from the base attempts to establish contact with the main squad and reports that a substantial group of monsters has been observed advancing toward their position. He informs them of a group of 40 orcs approaching from 6 o'clock, a group of 20 ogres approaching from 7 o'clock, and a group of 200 goblins approaching from 3 o'clock. He instructs the main squad to proceed to the intersection point 200 meters ahead at 11 o'clock and engage in battle. The girl with red hair issues orders for them to prepare for battle and launch an attack. He notices something flying overhead at an impressive speed and inquires about it. She explains that she's analyzing the undead monster field guide from Eruka. He questions the need for analysis, suggesting they simply go and eliminate it. The goblin attacks her and hurls her aside. He remarks that their mana and stats are decreasing at an abnormal rate, making it impossible to defeat the undead in this condition. He wonders if it's some kind of curse, and upon seeing her, he identifies it as a banshee. He realizes that their physical attributes are diminishing rapidly, making their endurance limited. He believes they need to inform the scouting unit and tries to establish contact with them to relay the information about her. Meanwhile, people observe that Park Suho has returned and acknowledges that he has achieved the incredible record of clearing a dungeon 87 times in only 6 days as he emerges from the portal. Han Dong-soo also notices the news of his return and inquires if they can go to meet him. Jang Ji-shik responds by asking if he wants to go to that place again. Han Dong-soo clarifies that he certainly does not and suggests that they lay back down, which they proceed to do. He reflects on what might have happened if there hadn't been a great disaster. He then asks the director and Kim Mi-so if he can enter now. The director requests that he return with them this time, emphasizing that it's the last dungeon. Han Dong-soo replies that if they are still alive and proceeds to enter the portal. The news broadcasts announce that patron Saint Park Soo-ho is finally entering the long-awaited last dungeon, commencing the rescue mission, and pondering the fate of the 707A combined unit. On the other side, Hong Se-hee engages the Banshee in combat, and goblins begin to attack the soldiers. Their stamina decreases, making it impossible for them to continue fighting. They express concern that if this situation continues, they will face annihilation. Sun Jinwoo spots a building and identifies it as the boss room, which they find sooner than expected. He suggests instructing the entire unit to gather there and deploying the iron curtain to separate the boss room from the outside. This would enable them to eliminate the isolated boss. He notes that it appears the base has been under attack, and the main squad is currently in the midst of battle. However, the situation doesn't look favorable, and their location is a 20-minute away. He insists they must go to their rescue. Upon their arrival, they find themselves trapped and declare that they are completely cut off. They notice the Dead Knight approaching to attack them, recognizing it as a level 6 Dungeon S rank boss. They are alarmed because there are 12 of them attacking at once. Choi Soo-young fell, and as she looked at her status screen, she noticed that her energy was very low. She found herself unable to get up. She wondered why she was thinking about Park Soo-ho at this time. Suddenly, fairies appeared before her, and the soldiers also noticed them. They wondered if they had all gone to heaven. Hong Se-hee also fell and saw the fairies. She pondered what this was and why the gauge was going up. She questioned the presence of these blue insects. Then, she spotted Park Soo-ho, and all her stats were instantly fully charged. A soldier remarked that he was overflowing with power, and Hong Se-hee had also fully recovered. They all prepared to attack the goblins once more. Park Soo-ho employed his fire fairies to eliminate all the goblins. He inquired if everything was taken care of here. Choi Soo-young approached him and hugged him, asking why he was there. She inquired about how he had managed to get in here. The soldiers wondered if that guy had saved them. After a while, Hong Se-hee arrives at the scene and observes that all the goblins have been killed. She then attempts to locate her team. She finds them some distance away, where soldiers are discussing Park Soo-ho, the one who saved them, and talking about his dating relationship with Choi Soo-young. Hong Se-hee expresses shock, wondering why he is here. She assumes his presence means this is the final dungeon and questions whether they are saying he managed to clear everything by himself. He attempts to push her away while stating that he has already mentioned she is too weak. She suggests they remain in their current position a little longer. He forcefully pushes her aside, remarking that she's too weak to be his partner. He rushes back towards her, inquiring if she's all right and warning her that she could get hurt if she stays by his side. Meanwhile, the soldiers are discussing the main squad, which initially consisted of 21 total members. There have been 6 fatalities, all of whom were fighters. Currently, there are 15 surviving members, and all 15 members have been gathered. Contact with the base camp and the scouting party has been severed. They mention that they can't even locate the corpses of those who perished here. They observe the goblins resurrecting once more and inquire whether they will continue to do so until the boss is killed. One of them asks what they should do next. Another soldier insists that they must first regroup with the base camp before searching for the scouting party's whereabouts. However, another soldier arrives and informs them that even if they head to the base immediately, they won't find anything. He reveals that there are 5 more people alive in the boss room, but the situation is dire. The soldier suggests they follow him without delay, emphasizing that time is of the essence, and if they delay, everyone will die. He swiftly departs, leaving the soldiers wondering how they are supposed to keep up with him. Hong Se-hee advises them that if they don't want to be left behind, they should run quickly, even though the path is infested with ghouls. She orders them to prepare for battle. One soldier summons his beast, and his bear and wolves join him as they launch an attack on the ghouls. However, some soldiers express doubt about the need to fight. As they debate, Choi Soo-young alerts them that it's 11 o'clock, and a flying entity is approaching. Park Soo-ho gazes at her and contemplates the fact that she is the strongest king of the undead, a lick. A wave of undead is swarming in their direction, and they wonder how they are going to deal with all of them. They prepare to launch an attack. On the other side, Sun Jinwoo observes a castle and contemplates the presence of a black mist, a shroud of darkness, the magic capable of reanimating a corpse, and the ability to summon death knights. He deduces that it must be a lick, and the one inside is the lick's life vessel. He explains that if they destroy the vessel, the Lick will perish, along with everything reanimated by it. He proceeds to enter the castle, affirming that he can handle it on his own and expressing the hope that they all survive until he destroys the Lick's heart. One of his team members remarks that even if it's a Lick, it won't be able to penetrate Sun Jinwoo's impenetrable black armor. On the other side, Park Soo-ho transforms into a golden eagle and takes flight to launch an attack on the Lick. He states his intention to put an end to their game, mentioning that he no longer has the time to keep playing with her, and advises her to return home. Portals open on her side, and he summons wyverns through them. They unleash a fiery assault from all sides, causing the Lick to vanish without a trace. Choi Soo-young remarks that it's not over yet, and emphasizes that a Lick does not meet its demise so easily. The scene shifts as Sin Jinwoo enters the castle, where he encounters numerous vessel monsters. He reflects that this situation is preferable, as he dislikes receiving help. He proceeds to advance and engage in combat with them, initiating a killing spree. However, he becomes ensnared by the monsters, and despite his efforts to free himself, it proves to be a challenging task. Outside the castle, his team members are exerting their best efforts in battling the undead ORCs, but they find themselves overwhelmed and bound. At that moment, Park Soo-ho's fairies arrive, accompanied by a wild boar and a bear, and they launch an assault on the undead. The team members are astonished to see Park Soo-ho. He employs fire fairies to incinerate the undead ORCs. A member of the SF unit notes that they are regaining their strength, and observes that all the undead outside the barrier are also being consumed by the flames. After a while, Park Soo-ho remarks that one member is missing. A member is informed that the captain went inside the castle. He decides to take action, declaring that he will retrieve the missing member. He instructs the others to remain where they are and not venture elsewhere when the main squad arrives. He then transforms into a golden eagle. Park Soo-ho employs fireflies to eliminate the ghouls, effectively killing them. He then transforms into a beast and launches an attack on them. He eventually reaches the boss's room where he finds Sun Jinwoo suspended in vessels. As he observes Sun Jinwoo covering in vessel, he contemplates the notion that he is the living, breathing heart of the Lick, the life vessel. He ponders whether Sun Jinwoo is intentionally being kept alive, with his life energy gradually draining into the vessel. He laments that, given a bit more time, the Lick could have fully resurrected. But unfortunately, his life is about to come to an end. To free Sun Jinwoo, Park Soo-ho utilizes fireflies to break the net. Meanwhile, the soldiers report that the castle has exploded, and the undead are disintegrating into dust and vanishing. Simultaneously, outside the door, an eruption occurs, signaling the start of a countdown. The soldiers announce that he has returned. Park Soo-ho emerges from the castle, carrying the unconscious Sun Jinwoo in his arms. His team members inquire about Sun Jinwoo's condition, and Park Soo-ho reassures them that he's not dead yet and suggests they all leave. They express their confidence that the Man of Iron would not simply perish. After a while, news broadcasts report that Park Soo-ho is in the midst of a mission to rescue a dungeon raid unit, marking an unprecedented milestone in human history. This rescue operation takes place merely an hour and 40 minutes after he commenced entering the dungeon to rescue the Special Forces unit. The door burst countdown has finally initiated, and the entire world is silently watching and hoping for the safe recovery of the brave combat team that ventured into the level 7 dungeon in their quest to save humanity. A few minutes later, they emerge from the dungeon. News broadcasts proudly announce that the combat team has successfully cleared the level 7 dungeon, a place that had plunged the world into fear and confusion. Park Soo-ho and the SF Unit 707A soldiers confidently exit. Although it appears that some of them have sustained injuries, it remains unclear who these injured individuals are, as well as the whereabouts of the dungeon, which has vanished. Reporters approach Park Soo-ho and inquire about how he is feeling at this moment and whether he intends to share his raid strategy. In response, he transforms into an eagle and takes flight, leaving the questions unanswered. Meanwhile, Hong Se-hee reflects on the idea that she could encounter a guy like that in her life, considering its fate. She then questions her companion, inquiring whether she has any feelings for him. The companion responds by asking what she's talking about, explaining that she is simply happy to see him. Hong Se-hee suggests that she should ask him out. Lee Sung-woo watches the news reporting his successful dungeon clearance and ponders whether there are still skills of which he remains unaware. He wonders about the kind of skill he used to clear the dungeon in just 2 minutes. As his phone's recharge depletes, he contemplates the likelihood that all his Japanese bank accounts have been frozen. He realizes that if he sells the blood crystals in his inventory, he'll likely be discovered. He overhears people speaking ill of him and praising Park Soo-ho. He decides that he should use these individuals as the first sacrifice for upgrading the regression stone. Sun Jinwoo recalls a childhood memory when he attempted to catch a football on the road, and a truck was approaching him. In that dire moment, a person intervened and saved him, but at the cost of their own life. He awakens in the hospital, where medical staff inquire about what happened and inform him that they heard Park Soo-ho rescued him and the other soldiers. On the other side, Han Dong-soo and Park Jun-ho open the door, and Hong Se-hee girl inquires whether Soo-ho is not awake yet, as they had agreed to meet today. Han Dong-soo mentions that Park Soo-ho has not awakened yet. She hands them kimbap soaked in raspberry wine and requests them to give it to him, as well as to call her when he wakes up. After she departs, Park Jun-ho remarks that he never knew he was this good with women. They proceed to check on Park Soo-ho, who is sleeping in a wild boar transformation. Park Jun-ho suggests attempting to wake him up, but Han Dong-soo recounts a previous experience when he tried to do that as a wolf and nearly got bitten to death. Just then, Hong Se-hee enters the room with a scream and inquires if Park Soo-ho is awake. He transforms into a cat, and she picks him up, hugs him, and explains that after the SF unit dispatch ends tomorrow, she will have to return to the guild and won't be able to see him for a while, so she wants to spend some time with him. Han Dong-soo points out that it's almost time for the transformation to end. Shortly thereafter, Choi Soo-young and Sun Jin-woo arrive to meet Park Soo-ho. He transforms back into a human, but after the transformation, he finds himself in a very inappropriate state with her. Choi Soo-young sees them, becomes angry, throws a box of bacchus at his head, and departs. Sun Jin-woo expresses his gratitude, mentioning that he wanted to thank him and has learned that receiving help doesn't only burden others. He promises to use the life that was saved to save more lives in return. Meanwhile, a member of Korea's Awaken Bureau's criminal task force is tailing Lee Sun. She inquires about his identity, to which he introduces himself, and asks why a woman who was found dead from a gunshot wound to the head at a murder scene in Silumdong is now alive and present. She becomes angry and transforms, turning into a lizard and subsequently killing him. Meanwhile, the director is engaged in a phone conversation. After he finishes the call, Kim Miso approaches and informs him that an order has been received from the Army's Special Warfare Command. The order entails disbanding the coalition and dispatching SF Unit 770 to the Level 6 dungeon in Seoul's Area 5. He acknowledges the urgency of the situation in Seoul. She adds that it's not just Seoul, the entire world is in turmoil. He expresses his weariness and mentions that saving the country is only enjoyable the first few times. She informs him that the executives are waiting in the conference room at the bureau and offers to connect via video. General Manager Kim is on the call and appears to be very distressed. He questions why he looks that way and if they all attended some boot camp. General Manager Kim responds by stating that there is a highly serious situation and insists that he must quickly come to the bureau. He states that trouble appears to be brewing in Russia. The director inquires if the Russian army possesses a stock of conventional weapons. If so, why are they doing this? He explains that the current scale of the monster wave, which originated in Harbin, has been assessed to exceed the capacity of conventional weapons. He adds, however, that the problem lies in the fact that if the monster's northbound route is altered due to nuclear weapons, the monsters destined for Russia will instead head towards North Korea. He mentions that the army is preparing for this possibility by dispatching and stationing the 1st and 3rd Corps at Paju and Dongganian along the Imjin River. However, he expresses concern that if the wave combines with the monsters in North Korea and heads south, they believe it would be challenging to contain them with their military's firepower alone. He concludes, surely they won't head in that direction. The director inquires about the situation concerning their country's dungeons. He is informed that 14 dungeons have emerged in Seoul today, including 6 level 6 dungeons. He says the requests for combat teams to be dispatched have been pouring in, but other guilds are also facing a shortage of combat teams, leaving no solution in sight. The director remarks they're telling me there are 6 level 6 dungeons. It's a total disaster. He reveals that 2 special task force members who are investigating a suspect have been murdered, and the suspect managed to escape. The director asks, who is the killer? Are they an awakener? He responds they believe it is a vampire who has died and been resurrected 3 times. After a while, the next morning, the SF unit gets ready to depart and bid farewell to each other. Kim Miso suggests to Choi Soo-young that she should return to the detection team. She is told to be sent to the most critical area, as she expresses her desire